What's up, everybody? We got the return of Ventress and Cad Bane for May the 4th this year. It's time to dive into Tales of the Underworld. Filoni gets things started picking up with the end of the Dark Disciple book, where Quinlan Vos and Obi-Wan Kenobi go to Dathomir to bury Ventress after their last encounter with Count Dooku. This was a great way to start the show, and I don't want to see anybody saying, oh, Filoni broke canon here, because for once, he actually followed a book, as the end of Disciple is incredibly open-ended. Then we jump to the Imperial era, probably about 3 to 4 years into it, I'd say, because they're using stormtroopers now, and she's just trying to lay low. But this young Order 66 survivor, like Ostrada, who's searching for the path, which we first heard of that concept in the Kenobi show, ruins that for her and sparks a new adventure, mentioning that Quinlan Vos started the path. This episode really got off to a hot start too, as they're attacked by an Inquisitor, just like Dark Disciple. I know there's some people who are tired of these guys, they say they're just worthless villains, but I just love their cockiness. They're the Empire in a physical form, and it's more an arrogance than a cockiness, but he claims to know who Ventress is, and then she gets Lyco's saber and is dual-wielding like the old days, yet he sticks to the one blade until she dices him up, and only an idiot would do that if he really knew about Ventress. But at the end of the day, much like Obi-Wan in his show actually, she's out of practice here, and so it's not the walk in the park it should have been for the former assassin. I mean, she was the Inquisitor of the Clone Wars era, along with Grievous of course, and they were far more efficient than any Inquisitor the Emperor and Vader threw out there, so this should have been a pretty easy fight for her. Old her, though. Anyway, Lyco takes the Inquisitor down while he's distracted, and so the two successfully escape, but then Ventress tells the kid who she really is, and this has to be the coldest name drop in Star Wars. Not because she's bragging or, showing off how many Jedi she killed, she's not, but simply because nobody's ever sounded so badass just trying to be alone. It was a great start to the Ventress arc in the show, building off Dark Disciple in a way I found satisfying. I also think, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but where she ends up after the third episode is a great honor to her time with Quinlan Vos, and I do think we'll see an animated show with her now that the Bad Batch is over. But the next episode picks up as she goes to her old hunting pals, Lots Razi and C-21 High Sniper, who appeared in Season 4 of the Clone Wars show in that bounty hunter arc with Ventress and Boba Fett trying to find the way to the path for Lyco and for Quinlan for Ventress. Lots agrees, but only for a deal, so Ventress is off to steal from the Empire. The Empire is building a new ship, and Lots is selling the data to a mystery buyer, but, and this is just speculation, I could imagine two people who would be interested and willing to buy from a hunter, Luthen Rael and Saw Gerrera. But either way, it seems to be the first wave of the Imperial Star Destroyers that they're building at this point, considering they're still using the Venators in the field. However, when the plan goes to shit, Ventress is betrayed and forced to go against her own words that you don't have friends in this business. It also proved to Lyco, who had just learned that she's a Jedi killer, that she has in fact changed as they're on their way to the path. I thought that was another solid episode for this Ventress arc here, and it wasn't, quite as flashy as the first episode, but its story did the heavy lifting for a change with a little Asagiana Jones action avoiding that ship ball towards the end of the episode. Then the final Ventress episode started with our new duo stumbling upon a separatist war hero and a big admirer of Dooku's former assassin. He's stuck in the war, stuck in his separatist nature, and it's cost him his legs. Ventress and Lyco, though, they get things figured out for him and get him a peaceful resolution to his dismay. That peaceful resolution gets them to the path, but then she refuses to go see if Quinlan's on the ship because she sacrificed her heart's desires when she came back to the land of the living. Lyco, he ends up missing the ship anyway, as the pair is stuck together, but I actually would have finished this in a different way if I wrote the show. Now, it ends the way it does because there's more likely than not a spin-off coming for Ventress, but I think it would have been cool if Lyco got on the ship, and then she goes on her way and sees the ship fly overhead, only for Quinlan to appear right next to her as a Force ghost. Now, that's a matter of could he do that or not in canon, but Quinlan, he has a rather unique connection to the Force, so I lean more towards yes than I do no. Regardless, I love these episodes, but this one was probably the weakest of her 3 episodes. The path that she walks here is one that Quinlan, who returned to the light when Ventress sacrificed herself for him, would be proud of, and also I miss Ventress lightsaber fights. They're so much fun. Alright, With that being said, it's time to move on to the Cad Bane episodes from Tales of the Underworld, which were a stark contrast to the Ventress episodes in a couple different ways, but we'll get into that in just a second. We started with a young Cad Bane, learning he used to go by Colby, and we're on his homeworld of Duro. We met his mentor, Laszlo, who finds him and his friend and brings them in because he's impressed by their antics. Let's just say he's not the best influence, considering Bane didn't know his parents or barely knew his parents, whatever he says, and that explains a lot. But I did find it interesting that in their childish crime, it wasn't Cad that was the ambitious one, really. It was more so his friend. Then, once the mentor brings him in, the roles are reversed. First, with the we want the 10 instead of 5 for payment. Then, when the larger Duros was shot, Nero just freezes and Cad is like, let's go. And finally, obviously following that, Cad escapes to become a part of the family, while Nero is caught and turns to the law. That night was the end of Colby and the birth of Cad Bane because without parents to nurture him, he ended up chameleoning his way through his young life until he found a persona that could work, Cad Bane. I just wish we didn't go back so far in his life to get to this story. I thought this was an okay start to Bane's arc, but I wouldn't even say this was as good as the worst Ventress episode was for me, which was the third one for me, so not an ideal start. I think going back so far took some interest out of it for me, but there was still enough they did with this young Bane or Colby that I was interested enough to keep watching. From there, we do a bit of a time jump as Bane's grown up and he's got his iconic voice now. Shout out Corey Burden as Laszlo, his mentor, is killed on a mission back to Duro, and so Bane, he's going home, seemingly for the first time since the night that Colby was left there for Cad Bane to exist. We got a great standoff between him and the Marshal who got Laszlo as he snakes his way into a win, as he so often does in the Clone Wars, by trying to shoot when Nero distracts the Marshal, and I found it really interesting that you put the spin on this that you still have Nero technically assisting Bane even though he's become a cop and Bane is now a bounty hunter. Anyway, Nero does end up arresting him after his girl snatches his weapon away before Bane can do something stupid. But I think taking his gun away was stupid because they could have walked away. Now, this is just my opinion, but I do not think Nero would have shot, and I think Cad could have done the droids in with ease. He had it in the bag. But that was absolutely a step in the right direction for the Cad Bane arc, as I thought it was far better than the first episode. This is also just more of what I want to see from a Bane story. Like, this is what I imagined when I heard young Bane. They probably should have just started with this episode or had him be a little bit older in that first episode. I don't know, but thankfully it got better. Then the final Bane episode sees him return to Duro once again, honor and revenge of the Sith with a what's the situation line. And the situation, Bane, is that your girl was pregnant and your best friend raised your kid after he arrested you, and then your girl died. Tell that to any guy and he'll lose it. Tell that to Cad Bane, you're the one losing. But in getting his revenge, he creates another version of himself as his kid barely knew his mother and his dad just killed his stand-in dad and walked away. That's Matthew Murdock levels of trauma right there, which, speaking of trauma, I'm glad that we don't know why he's got the breathing apparatus in the Clone Wars. It's just, I didn't need an answer on that question. But I also just thought it was a brilliant way to close Bane's arc, as like I said, it didn't have the strongest of starts, but it really picked up, and it kind of also, the episode 2 and 3 kind of made me a little bit softer on episode 1. It was just a reverse order of the Ventress stuff for me, where his got better with each episode, and she very gradually got worse, but it was much more consistent on her side of things than on Bane's side of things. But overall, this was a damn cool show that was better than Tales of the Empire, but not as good as Tales of the Jedi. That's still the best of the Tales shows for me. Those stories were great. And so that's going to do it for my breakdown and review for Tales of the Underworld. I want to know whose arc you guys like better, so let me know Bane or Ventress down in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this every week, and make sure you have a great day.